Hello. Assalamu alaikum everyone. I think everyone is able to hear me. Hello. Okay. So shall I start? Okay. You can all hear me loud and clear. That's good. So let us start today's lecture. The approach is the topic is the approach to a patient with lymphadenopathy with and without splenomegaly. My name is Dr. Sadia Iqbal, and I'm working as an assistant professor in the Department of Medicine in Dow University of Health Sciences, OJA campus. So, before proceeding towards the topic, let us have a brief review of the structures that are going to be discussed in today's lecture, that is lymph node. So, what basically is lymph node? It is a small bean-shaped structure that is part of the body's immune system. The immune system is basically the defense system of the body that protects the body against the invading organisms like viruses, bacteria, fungi, and protozoa. The lymph nodes filter these substances that travel through the lymphatic fluid, and they contain lymphocytes, which are basically white blood cells that help the body fight the infection and disease. So, we should understand the dynamics, the morphology of the lymph node, that it is usually less than 1 cm in diameter, but it tends to be larger in adolescence than later in life. Lymph nodes are often palpable in the inguinal region in healthy people, may also be palpable in the neck, particularly the submandibular, because chronic trauma and infection is more common in these regions. Let me recall with you people that we have got a group of lymph nodes in the cervical region, in the abdominal region, and then in the axillary and the inguinal region. In the cervical region, we have got the anterior and the posterior axillary. Okay, so in the cervical region, we have got the anterior and the posterior axillary lymph nodes. I think everybody is able to see the picture. I'm moving my mouse, my cursor, so that you can better visualize what I'm talking about. So these are the posterior cervical lymph nodes. These are the deep cervical lymph nodes. These are the superficial cervical lymph nodes, basically constitute the anterior cervical lymph node. In front of the ear, we have got the preauricular. Just below the ear, we have got the jugulo-digastric, parotid lymph nodes in proximation with the parotid gland, and then the posterior auricular lymph nodes, and thus at the nape of the neck, we have got the occipital lymph nodes. Coming towards the mandible, the underside of the mandible contains submental, while the angle of the mouth, you have got the, at the angle of the mouth, you have got the submandibular lymph node. So this was the basic anatomy of the lymph nodes of the head and the neck. As we already discussed that there are a group of lymph nodes in head and neck: supraclavicular, deltopectoral, axillary, epitrochlear, inguinal, and popliteal. Please remember that they are a enlargement of the lymph nodes. Enlargement of these lymph nodes is a sign of infection of that particular area to which these lymph nodes are draining from. Like, if you get the enlargement of the axillary lymph node, you should have the suspicion that the patient might have a breast pathology. The infection is coming from the breast or the chest wall. That is why the draining lymph nodes are enlarged. Similarly, at the inguinal area, if the inguinal lymph nodes are enlarged, then it gives a clue that there is some pathology going on at the inguinal regions, that basically comprises of the pelvic draining lymph nodes and the genitourinary tract lymph nodes. So we should have a critical idea of in search of the infection in these particular areas from where these lymph nodes are draining. So let us look at the groups that I've just mentioned. We can see the supraclavicular lymph nodes, which are 2 to 4 in number. Please remember, on the right side, they drain the mediastinum and the lungs, as I just mentioned. In the left side, they drain the abdomen. The deltopectoral lymph node drains the arm. The axillary lymph nodes, I mentioned it, breast, a very important draining area, thorax and the arm. Epitrochlear lymph node is the medial side of the arm below the elbow, drains the structures at the forearm. Coming towards the inguinal area, as I already mentioned, lower extremity, genitalia, buttock, and abdominal wall below the level of the umbilicus. Again, popliteal lymph nodes are responsible for draining of the lower leg. So, this drawing schematically depicts the major lymph nodes in the head and the neck that are likely to be enlarged on physical examination in patients with various local or systemic diseases. The major nodal groups are shown here in bold, while the areas draining into these nodal groups are noted when appropriate. While enlargement of both the right and the left supraclavicular lymph nodes may reflect disease in the thorax, left supraclavicular lymph node enlargement because of its drainage pattern may also reflect the presence of the abdominal involvement. For example, you have heard of Virchow's node. Can anyone tell me when there is an enlargement of the Virchow's node, what disease do we suspect? I'm expecting answers. What disease is are we going to suspect when we find an enlargement of the Virchow node on the clinical examination? Okay, so while waiting for the answers, I'm going to proceed forward with the diagnostic approach. Please remember, history is a critical part of the diagnosis, proceeding towards the physical examination. And finally, you're going to order some diagnostic tests to have a conclusive diagnosis. So the history should be inquired about localizing signs and symptoms suggesting infections or malignancy. History of exposures, for example, cat bite or cat scratch. And again, high risk behavior, that is history of IV drug abuse and extramarital affairs and sexual contacts. Constitutional symptoms such as fever, weight loss, drenching night sweats, pruritus. These constitutional symptoms are very important in terms of investigating chronic disease like tuberculosis or any sort of malignancy. Use of medications that can cause lymphadenopathy. It is very interesting to note that there are certain medications which cause the lymph node enlargement, and ideally speaking, one being a physician should advise the patient and counsel the patient regarding the lymph node enlargement while using a particular medication. And then foreign travel. The history of travel is really very important because there are some diseases, they are endemic in certain areas, which can lead to eventual lymph node enlargement. And one should be counseled about that as well. So there are some causes of peripheral lymphadenopathy. And please remember, this is not a complete list, and there are a number of causes. There are a number of causes, but it was not possible to include all of it. But yes, the most important one, the most common ones, and the most encountered in the clinical practice, it is being mentioned here for your convenience. So as we already discussed, that bacterial, viral, mycobacterial, fungal, protozoal, spirochetal, every type of infection can come up with lymphadenopathy. Please remember the names of the infection that among the causes of localized lymphadenopathy, the bacteria responsible are streptococcal pharyngitis, causing streptococcal sore throat, the very famous, the very common skin infections, staphylococcal Stardust syndrome, and then scarlet fever. These are the most common infections that we encountered in the childhood. Tularemia, plague, a disease which was endemic long time ago, but which is not much talked about nowadays. Cat scratch disease is still coming in clinical practice. Diphtheria, still common in third world countries, for which we do the immunization. Chancroid and rat bite fever. Coming towards the common causes of generalized bacterial lymphadenopathy, one should remember brucellosis, leptospirosis, lymphogranuloma venereum, and typhoid fever. Viral causes includes the most famous HIV. It is a cause of it can cause generalized lymphadenopathy. Again, Epstein-Barr virus. It can result in generalized lymphadenopathy and hepatosplenomegaly, but the most commonly involved lymph nodes are cervical lymph nodes. Again, herpes simplex, cytomegalo, mumps, measles, rubella, hepatitis B, dengue fever, any virus can come up with lymphadenopathy. But yet, talking about the most common ones, one should remember the names of HIV and Epstein-Barr virus. Mycobacterial tuberculosis, a disease endemic in third world country, particularly in Pakistan. We see very commonly, we see in clinical practice, the TB lymphadenitis, the discharging sinuses from the infected lymph nodes. So the fungal causes responsible for lymphadenopathy are histoplasmosis, coccidioidomycosis, and cryptococcosis. Protozoal causes include toxoplasmosis and leishmaniasis. By the way, leishmaniasis is common in the Balochistan part of our country. It has got a vector fly, which is very common and endemic in that part of the country. And spirochetes, as we all remember, and I think it is easy to recall, secondary syphilis, Lyme's disease, talking about the organisms like Borrelia burgdorferi. We have been through that as well. Coming towards the cancers, squamous cell carcinoma, the head and the neck, metastatic carcinomas, every type of metastasis. When it is going to metastasize, not only the primary area which is affected by the cancer, the lymph node of that area is going to be enlarged, but also the lymph nodes or the area to which the cancer has metastasized is also going to be enlarged. So please focus on the area of the draining lymph nodes. Whatever lymph nodes you are getting in your examination, you should have the basic idea of the anatomy of that area so that you can have a conclusion of the place from where the disease is arising. Lymphoma and leukemias. Coming towards the lymphoproliferative disorder, please remember angioimmunoblastic lymphadenopathy with dysproteinemia. Not very common entity, but yes, it does come encountered in clinical practice. Autoimmune lymphoproliferative disorders, Rosai-Dorfman disease, hemophagolymphohistiocytosis. Immunological causes include serum sickness, drug reactions, and by the way, when I was talking about the drug, please remember, phenytoin is the most common used anti-epileptic that causes generalized lymphadenopathy. So every time you're going to start a patient with phenytoin, you're going to counsel the patient regarding this particular side effect. Among the endocrine causes, it includes the hypothyroidism and Addison's disease. And among the miscellaneous causes, it includes sarcoidosis, lipid storage disease, amyloidosis, histiocytosis, chronic granulomatous diseases, Castleman disease, Kikuchi disease, Kawasaki's, inflammatory pseudotumor, SLE, RA, Still's disease, dermatomyositis, and Schacht-Strauss syndrome. Okay, we all know that sarcoidosis is a disorder, multisystem disorder, which is characterized by non-caseating granulomas. Lipid storage disease is a metabolic disease. Amyloidosis, again, a type of metabolic disease. Histiocytosis is a fungal infection. By chronic granulomatous disease, which we broadly include fungal and mycobacterial diseases because they are responsible for chronic granulomatous infection. Castleman and Kikuchi disease are having different organism, but the mechanism of pathophysiology is similar to that of tuberculosis. Kawasaki disease is a vasculitis, very common in young children, which is characterized by coronary aneurysms. And the treatment involves IV immunoglobulin and aspirin. Inflammatory pseudotumor, anything which is infectious or inflammatory, the draining lymph node can get enlarged. And please remember SLE, RA, Still's disease, dermatomyositis. They come under the entity of connective tissue diseases, autoimmune disorders, and the lymph nodes tend to get enlarged in all of them. Churg-Strauss syndrome is basically a small vessel vasculitis in which there is involvement of the pulmonary, that is the inflammation of the lung, vasculitis involving the lung predominantly, and the peripheral nerves as well. And it is characterized by marked eosinophilia. So this was a brief review of the diseases so that these diseases do not sound strange to you. But I know it is very difficult to go through each of them at the moment. But please remember that while talking about something, one should have a brief idea of what we are talking about. So, drugs that cause lymphadenopathy. Phenytoin has been mentioned over here. Please remember these names, or try to remember at least these names. Allopurinol is an anti-gout drug. Atenolol is a beta blocker. Captopril is the ACE inhibitor. Carbamazepine is an anti-epileptic. Cephalosporins are a group of antibiotics. Gold. This is basically used in the treatment of the rheumatoid arthritis, but due to its nephrotoxicity, it is not prescribed as much these days. Hydralazine, a drug which is used in treatment of acute coronary syndrome. Penicillin, a famous group of antibiotic. Phenytoin is an anti-epileptic. Primidone, pyrimethamine, quinidine, sulfonamides, and Sulindac. Sulindac again is an anti-epileptic drug. Sulfonamides are antibiotics, and these three are a combination of anti-malarial and antibiotic. Quinidine is basically an anti-arrhythmic drug. So again, it is very difficult to remember all of it, but yet try to remember at least the common ones, that is the anti-gout drug, the beta blocker, the ACE inhibitors, the anti-epileptics, and the famous group of antibiotic, that is penicillin and cephalosporin. Coming towards the physical examination. Whenever a structure is described in terms of physical examination, one should keep in mind that what aspects should be focused upon. Like, what is the location of the lymph node? Either if you're finding a lymph node at one location, is it localized to that area, or there is lymphadenopathy at other parts as well? So while describing a lymph node, one should be very particular in designating the lymph node as localized or generalized. The size of the lymph node is really very important. Any lymph node which is less than 1 cm is not clinically significant, but any lymph node which is of 1 cm or greater than 1 cm becomes clinically significant. Tenderness, the famous sign of inflammation, and yes, if there is tenderness associated with any lymph node, then it means that there is something wrong which should be worked up. Consistency is really very important, because if the consistency is rubbery, it points towards the diagnosis of lymphoma. If the consistency is mated, it points towards the diagnosis of granulomatous disease like tuberculosis or fungal infection. And then fixation. Fixation can be described in terms of two dimensions, like fixation to the underlying structures and fixation to the overlying skin. Fixation to anything that I just mentioned is not a good sign. It means that likely the lymph node is having something which is not benign, something which is chronic, something which is malignant. It is not a good sign at all. So describing the lymph node examination in these parameters is of utmost importance. Okay, so let's focus on some pictures. I think everyone is able to see the picture now. We have got a lymph node over here, and I think everyone can designate the area where it is present. Okay, This is the supraclavicular area. This is the anterior cervical chain. And this is a lymph node in the lower part of the anterior cervical chain. Please focus. It can be enlargement of the single lymph node, or it can be a mated formation of 3 to 4 lymph nodes, 5 to 6 lymph nodes, 1 to 2 lymph nodes. How can we differentiate? By physical examination. So, which lymph node? Submandibular. This is the mandible, and this is just below the mandible. So, we are going to label it as submandibular. Okay. So, a very inflamed, erythematous, shiny and stretchy skin. And you can see the zone of inflammation starting from here, and it is extending up to the ear lobule. So it's really a big one. It's really a big one, and you can see that it is dragging the skin. It is literally dragging the skin. Skin should not be like this. It should be adherent to the mandible, but it is dragging the skin. So it must be something which should be hard, probably. We can just comment by seeing it. Until and unless we do the physical examination, we cannot proceed towards a final comment. But yes, from the look, one can clearly identify that it is an inflamed one. So, this is the chin of the patient. And what is this going on? I don't think it is a good picture. And there is some, being obese, he's having sagging of the skin as well. But please remember that I just wanted to show the concept of generalized lymphadenopathy, which can be well visualized in this area. The supraclavicular fossas are full. One can see from here. The anterior cervical chains are full. It means there is enlargement. The submandibular areas are full. It means there is enlargement. And do you see that? Okay. So it appears that, please remember, there are some diseases that present with nodal masses. The lymph nodes become coalesced together and become so much and so enlarged that instead of presenting as a solitary nodule or a combination of 2 to 3 nodules, they start coalescing and form a nodal mass that is very typical of lymphoma. So please remember that you can get generalized lymphadenopathy, or you can get an enlarged mated nodal mass as well. So please try to focus on the consistency of the lymph node while examining the patient. So, radiological imaging of lymph nodes, the arrows are pointing towards the enlargement, and this is the morphological appearance of the lymph node at the inguinal area. I think the arrows are pointing very well towards this is the inguinal area, the right inguinal area, this is the left inguinal area, and you are able to see it like this in the imaging study. So, localized lymphadenopathy suggests local causes. Search for the pathology in the area of the draining lymph node, as we discussed already. Some systemic diseases can also present with localized adenopathy, like tularemia, aggressive lymphoma. Please remember, lymphoma does not mean that all the lymph nodes have to be enlarged. If the disease is at a very early stage, even a single lymph node can be the presenting symptom. So be vigilant while evaluating the symptoms of the patient. Cervical adenopathy. We just discussed the common causes of cervical adenopathy is bacterial infections, infectious mononucleosis. The most common virus responsible for this disease is Epstein-Barr virus, toxoplasmosis, the famous torch infections of pregnancy, starts with the T, and the T stands for toxoplasmosis, tuberculosis, lymphoma, head and neck malignancies. Location 3, supraclavicular lymphadenopathy. I just showed you supraclavicular lymph nodes, and the area was marked by means of my cursor. Is associated with a high risk of malignancy. Please remember, then the right side, it points towards different pathologies. On the left side, it points towards a different pathology. In the right side, it is the draining lymph node of mediastinum, lungs, and esophagus. But on the left side, I was talking about the Virchow node and nobody answered. So it indicates the presence of an abdominal malignancy. If you find an enlarged left supraclavicular lymph node, do not look for the left mediastinum, left lung, left part of the esophagus. Look for the abdomen, because it drains from the abdomen and its enlargement can relate to any abdominal malignancy. So be very careful while examining the supraclavicular lymph nodes. Axillary lymph nodes drain from the arm, thoracic wall, and the breast. So infections are common from these areas, and in the absence of upper extremity lesion, cancer is often found, particularly breast cancer. Epitrochlear lymph nodes are always pathological. Infection from the forearm and the hand, lymphoma, sarcoidosis, tularemia, and secondary syphilis. Inguinal lymph nodes usually caused by lower extremity infection and sexually transmitted diseases or cancer. The famous pelvic inflammatory diseases usually are responsible for the enlargement of the inguinal lymph node. Okay. So, generalized lymphadenopathy, usually a manifestation of a systemic disease. We discussed HIV, we discussed mycobacterial infection, infectious mononucleosis, systemic lupus erythematosus, medications, lymphoma, and leukemia. How are we going to work up for a patient who is coming with lymphadenopathy? Please remember that we have to proceed in a sequential manner. And every investigation panel has some diagnostic indication. Starting from the hematology, proceeding towards the biochemistry, and then imaging studies, and finally determining the disease in terms of relevant testing. This should be the approach towards a patient with lymphadenopathy. CBC can give you a clue of the bone marrow malignancies like leukemia or lymphoma. In the viral infections, you're going to get a lymphocytosis, but lymphopenia can also be present, while in cases of bacterial infections, you can get neutrophilia. So CBC and the peripheral film can give you a clue of the disease or the pathological process that is going on in the body. Chest X-ray. Please remember, widening of the mediastinum in a patient who is presenting with enlargement of the cervical lymph nodes, axillary lymph nodes, inguinal lymph nodes, supraclavicular lymph nodes, and you find a widened mediastinum, it indicates enlargement of the central lymph nodes, that is the mediastinal lymph nodes, and your patient might be having lymphoma. So always look in the chest X-ray for widened mediastinum to rule out the mediastinal lymphadenopathy, which is very supportive of lymphoproliferative disorder. PPT is purified protein derivative, the famous test which is done for tuberculosis and for ruling out latent tuberculosis, HIV antibody by Western blot or by ELISA. These are the two techniques that are used for the detection of the viral antibody. Anti-nuclear antibodies, the screening test, the famous screening test for autoimmune disorders like SLE. Other specific tests in need of, obviously, if these are inconclusive, then there will be a need of CT or MRI and maybe a lymph node biopsy. Or in case of any hematological malignancy like leukemia or lymphoma, one can proceed, if indicated, towards a bone marrow biopsy as well. So I just mentioned about the lymph node biopsy. If an abnormal node has not resolved after 4 weeks, or there is a high suspicion of malignancy, by which I mean to say that if the patient is presenting to you with fever, weight loss, drenching night sweats, which are the constitutional symptoms or the B symptoms, we can proceed towards biopsy option. Open biopsy, fine needle aspiration biopsy, or core needle biopsy. So open biopsy is the technique in which uh, there is excision of whole of the lymph node, and it is more sensitive because whole of the specimen of the lymph node is removed by an open biopsy under general anesthesia and is examined in the histopathology department for the presence of infection or malignancy. Fine needle aspiration requires the insertion or the aspiration of the lymph node fluid and then its visualization under the microscope. It does not give any histopathological evidence, but it can be useful when searching for recurrence of cancer. And then there is a core needle biopsy in which you do not remove the whole of the lymph node, but a chunk of the tissue is removed. A piece of the lymph node is removed in situations where open lymph node biopsy cannot be performed. It is a very common scenario in which sometimes the lymph node lies in close approximation with any vessel. So it becomes very difficult to surgically approach the lymph node and it can compromise the life of the patient. So open biopsy can be replaced with core needle biopsy for diagnostic purposes. So incision and drainage, imaging and observation over time. These are the three modalities which can be instituted upon a patient depending upon the presentation he's coming up with to you. So we were just dealing with isolated lymphadenopathy, and when lymphadenopathy comes with splenomegaly, what does it mean? It means that coexistence with splenomegaly in a patient with lymphadenopathy implies a systemic illness. Please note that spleen is also a component of an immune system, and it also has the function of the phagocytosis. So it can become enlarged in case of any immune stress resulting from any infection in the body. Any systemic illness like infectious mononucleosis, malignancy like lymphoma, acute lymphoblastic leukemia, chronic lymphoblastic leukemia, systemic lupus erythematosus, sarcoidosis, toxoplasmosis, and cat scratch disease. So please do not deal with the spleen as a separate entity. Every time you come up with examination of lymph node, focus on the spleen as well because it is going to narrow your differential diagnosis. Now let us focus towards this young woman who is 25-year-old, having persistent dry cough for 3 months, fever, weight loss for 3 months, right cervical lymphadenopathy. The greatest one is 2 centimeters enlarged, right supraclavicular lymphadenopathy. Again, the greatest one is 2 centimeter enlarged, no splenomegaly. So, what is coming to your mind? I would be very happy to see some answers in the chat box. Okay, someone just mentioned tuberculosis and another student also mentioned tuberculosis. Okay, so let me have a look of the towards the X-ray. I just mentioned that you're going to see the chest X-ray for a particular type of lymph nodes. What type? Can someone please recall? Can someone please mention in the chat box? Absolutely. Someone just messaged me directly the diagnosis. Yes. Mediastinal. Okay. So please tell me, is it mediastinal? Is it mediastinal? Okay, I'm getting the answers now. It means that everyone was listening to me. That was a very good sign. Okay, so What do you think it is? And what has happened to the heart? What has happened towards the left border of the heart? What has happened towards the right border of the heart? We can't see an apex, but we can see one bulge, two bulge, and this whole of the side is like enlarged, is bulky, is heavy. I think everyone is able to see my cursor. This is the trachea. We can clearly visualize the air in the trachea, the windpipe. It is very important to look and comment on the surrounding structures as well. So trachea can be visualized, and then we have got a bulky mediastinum. Boot-shaped heart. No, it's not a boot-shaped heart. It's an adult heart. Boot-shaped heart is basically for the congenital cyanotic heart disease, which is TOF, tetralogy of Fallot, and we are dealing with an adult XA. But yes, boot-shaped heart was a nice recall for TOF. Okay, so let's find out. Please remember that if you're a good student or you're a good clinician, you should and you must be able to give at least 3 to 4 differentials for anything which is coming in front of you. It can be a CBC, it can be a peripheral film, or it can be a chest x-ray, or it can be a patient even. But if you're good and you're competent enough, you should have the capability and the capacity to give at least 3 to 4 differentials at your level, at the student level. Lymphoma was rightly said, Hodgkin's and non-Hodgkin's. It depends upon the age of the patient to whom the X-ray belongs. That to which age is he like? To which age group is he belonging? And then we can have an idea that what class of lymphoma is he suffering from. The other differential can be lung cancer. This patient might be a smoker. Bronchogenic carcinoma. This patient can have secondary lung metastasis, mediastinal lung lymphadenopathy as a result of metastasis from some other part, like breast, like colon. It can be some other neoplasm. Thyroid, the structures present in the mediastinum are of utmost importance if you are getting a mediastinal lymphadenopathy, and the thyroid tops of the list among them. So look for the thyroid of the patient clinically. And then there are non-neoplastic causes like sarcoidosis, tuberculosis. All the fungal infections are going to give lymphadenopathy. And then please remember there is a group of inorganic dust disease, which is called silicosis. And there are some other entities as well, like I think you must have heard or you must have read about berylliosis and coal worker pneumoconiosis. So silicosis is the disease in which you get this type of lymphadenopathy. There are a number of occupational exposure diseases, but this one is responsible for this type of lymphadenopathy. So every time you come across with a patient of lymphadenopathy, or with a CBC of a patient having lymphadenopathy, or a chest X-ray of a patient having lymphadenopathy, if you have a command or the grip of the subject or a grip on the subject, you must be able to present with at least 3 differentials. If you're able to do that, it means that you have mastered the topic. So what is going to be the next step? How are we going to approach? I have accidentally stepped towards the answer, but mediastinum is a very sensitive area. It comprises of a number of structures and some big vessels. It lies in close-ups of, trachea is there, esophagus is there, heart is lying over there, some large blood vessels are lying over there. So one should be very careful while taking a sample of tissue for the diagnostic purpose. How it can be approached? Ultrasound or CT guided biopsy. We just cannot put a blind needle in these types of sensitive structures. It can result in trauma, bleeding, infection, compromise, like pneumothorax, pneumomediastinum, puncture lung. So needle aspiration of lymph node reveal a few necrotic cell, and needle biopsy of the lymph node represents or gives the picture of mixture of B and T lymphocytes, a few atypical cells. Likely the diagnosis is Hodgkin's lymphoma. So that was all about it. I think that everyone has understood, and
Hello.
hello, assalamu alaikum.